Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar run by New Zealand Shores. I am one of our licensed advisors, Charlotte Stockman, and I am joined by my colleagues Fabien and Julia. Today we're here to chat about the skilled migrant category changes that were announced last week by Immigration New Zealand, which has seen immigration completely revamp the skilled migrant category from what we've known for probably about the last 15 years. So there is a big change in that space. So we're just here to hopefully clear some of those questions up for you and give you an overview of what that looks like. It's a complete revamp. We're going from 180 points to claiming 6 points. There are new requirements, and we will also talk about the alternative pathways and the accredited employer work visa changes. So how you can claim 6 points is now effectively made up of academic qualifications, occupational registration, salary thresholds, and New Zealand work experience. So if you look at the top three there, being the registration, qualifications, and thresholds, you have to be eligible under one of those categories, and we'll go into those a little bit more in depth soon. Plus, to make up any shortfall in points from those top three, you can also use New Zealand work experience to claim the remainder of your points to become eligible. So I will hand over to my wonderful colleagues to talk through the next couple slides with you about occupational registration and salary and qualifications.
Hey everyone, my name is Fabien Maisonneuve. I'm one of the licensed advisors in the Hamilton office in the North Island of New Zealand. So as Charlotte mentioned, one of the ways to claim those initial points is if you hold some form of occupational registration. Now, how this is calculated is a little bit different to the previous policy. Immigration New Zealand now thinks in terms of years of training required. And for this, you can claim anywhere from 3 to 6 points. Now, some of that experience or some of these registrations may actually be acquired while you're in New Zealand on a temporary work visa, which would give you the opportunity to, while you're on a work visa, work towards meeting those requirements and acquire some form of registration. These registrations are not necessarily mandatory by law. Some of these are, but some aren't. But they are seen as adding some valuable skill set to the New Zealand economy. So this is why essentially you can claim points for it. If we take a few examples, an electrical installer, for example, if you hold registration as an electrical installer by the EWRB, this is worth 3 points in the eyes of immigration. If you have registration from the Real Estate Authority of New Zealand as a real estate agent, that is 4 points. A registered teacher with a practicing certificate by the New Zealand Teaching Council is worth 5 points. And holding chartered accountant Australia and New Zealand membership, so essentially working in New Zealand as a chartered accountant, is worth 6 points. That last one is interesting because in New Zealand, you can work as an accountant without being a CANS membership. But if you do hold membership, you can claim 6 points for making you de facto eligible for residence on the basis of a job offer. Another way to get points is through your academic qualifications. So under the previous 180 points under the skilled migrant category, you could claim points for qualification level 4 and above, so certificate, diploma, bachelor, master's, or doctorate. Under the new 6-point system, only bachelors and above, so the equivalent of a level 7 on the New Zealand qualification framework, will be counted. If you have a bachelor degree or postgraduate certificate, and these are assessed as the equivalent of a level 7, you can claim 3 points for them. A bachelor with honors or a postgraduate diploma is a bit more, level 8, 4 points. A master's degree is usually the equivalent of a level 9 and thus can claim 5 points. And a PhD or doctorate, level 10 on the qualification framework, is 6 points. Now, some of these overseas qualifications may or may not be automatically recognized in immigration policy. There is a list that is updated on a regular basis. We as advisors can check your overseas qualification against that list And if it is not recognized, you may need to get an international qualification assessment from the NZQA before you can claim points for it. So the NZQA would assess your overseas qualification and put it on the New Zealand framework.
And the third option to get some points for your application is through the salary thresholds. So the median wage is currently $29.66. That's the baseline for immigration and allows you to apply for that accredited employer work visa. Some of the lower skilled occupations may need to be paid more than that to qualify. But in terms of points for your skilled migrant application, if you're being paid 1.5 times the median wage, which is $44.49 an hour, you can claim 3 points towards your application. If you're paid twice the median, which is $59.32 an hour, you're going to get 4 points. And for those that are paid $88.98 an hour, 3 times the median wage, you're going to get 6 points for that. And that would then make you eligible to start your residence process without needing to top it up in any other way.
Cool. So as Julia and Fabien have mentioned, there are a range of ways to claim between 3 and 6 points with the qualifications, registration, and salary thresholds. It's important to note you can't combine those 3 factors to claim 6 points. So for example, you can't have an occupational registration that's worth 3 points and a bachelor's degree worth 3 points to create your 6. Immigration will not allow that. So in that situation, you would either have to claim the occupational registration or the bachelor's degree, and then your points would have to be made up with New Zealand work experience. So for example, if you have a bachelor's degree, which is worth 3 points, you would then need to work in New Zealand for 3 years because you are granted a point for each year that you have worked in New Zealand, up to a total of 3 years or 3 points to claim that 6. So for example, if you had a master's degree worth 5 points, you then only have to work in New Zealand for 1 year to claim 1 point to get you to your total of 6. So it's really important that you do understand what that looks like for you specifically and how long you may or may not need to work in New Zealand before being able to apply. Cool. So Fabien, I'll just go through some case studies, which will hopefully make what we've just spoken about a little bit clearer. So I'll hand over to you for these first ones, Fabien.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. So when that policy came about, the first thing that sprung to mind is who is still eligible, who becomes eligible, who misses out. So we've plotted there a few of the common occupations that we see come through our emails. If you take a software developer as an example, someone with a bachelor degree could, and a job offer as a software developer, could claim 3 points for their bachelor degree, as long as it's recognized. And then they would have to work for 3 years in New Zealand, claiming 3 points after 3 years, and that makes up the 6. Worth noting that software developer is also an occupation that is on the Greenlist, an alternative residence pathway, but it has a requirement on its own, mainly a high salary for that occupation. We'll talk about this a bit later. If we move on to another kind of occupation, let's say a security alarm specialist with 15 years experience, under the new rules, if that person has a qualification, it is actually likely to be the equivalent of a level 4 certificate in New Zealand, which is no longer worth any points under the new rules. So this person would, to be eligible for residence, have to secure a job on 1.5 times the median wage, so $44.49 per hour, and that's 3 points, and work for 3 years in New Zealand. If they secure a job below that 1.5 times, essentially they will not be eligible for residence unless they find a way to secure some form of registration that qualifies. If we take the example of an accountant with a bachelor degree, this person would have a couple of options. One, they could claim 3 points for their bachelor degree, if recognized, and work in New Zealand for 3 years to make up the 6. Or if they meet the Chartered Accountant Australia New Zealand membership requirements, become a chartered accountant, would qualify for 6 points. A social worker with a bachelor degree may actually be able to claim 3 points for their bachelor degree and 3 points after 3 years experience in New Zealand. Alternatively, their social workers board registration would qualify for points, but ultimately social workers are also an occupation on the green list. So the green list would be the recommended option for them rather than going through the point system.
Awesome, thanks for that, Fabien. So just a few more examples, just to, I guess, give people a bit of a range of ideas as to what their eligibility may look like. So first off the bat here, we've got a motor mechanic. So motor mechanics would typically hold a level 4 qualification, so they can't claim points for their qualification. They don't require an occupational registration, and they're unlikely to be able to be paid 1.5 times the median wage. There may obviously be some exceptions to that, but motor mechanics are also on tier 2 of the green list, which means once they have worked as a motor mechanic in New Zealand for 24 months, they would be able to apply under the work to residence pathway under that tier 2 option. So that would be their pathway to residency. Care assistants or care workers, once again, they will likely hold a certificate which they cannot claim points for, and they also do not have registration, and they're also unlikely to get paid 1.5 times the median wage. However, care workers, we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but they are also able to apply for a work to residency visa after working in New Zealand for 24 months. So that would be their pathway to residency. Bookkeepers with a diploma, this is an example of someone we would see as not being eligible to apply for residency unless they were to meet that 1.5 times the median wage. So perhaps you're really specialised in your area and your employer recognises that and they are able to offer you that pay rate. But if you aren't able to obtain that pay rate of 1.5 times the median wage, you would not be eligible to apply for residency. You'd have to look at alternative pathways. Carpenters, they're a bit of a new one for us in terms of an occupational registration. So the Ministry of Business in New Zealand has a range of occupations which are able to be licensed under the Licensed Building Practitioners Code. There's a whole variety in there, from carpenters, roofers, plasterers, site managers. There's quite a few different options in there. And once a person who fits one of those criteria has got one of those licensed building practitioner registrations, they would then be able to apply for residency after having worked in New Zealand for a period of time. So different registrations with that licensed building practitioner code are worth different points. So we'd need to look at you on a case-by-case basis. But if you were able to get that registration as a carpenter, that registration is worth 3 points in that case. And then you'd have to work in New Zealand for 3 years in order to be able to claim your total of 6 and then apply for residence.
Thanks, Charlotte. So as well as updating the skilled migrant category to a 6-point system, they've also outlined some changes to come for the accredited employer work visa to allow for people sufficient time to accumulate that New Zealand work experience if you need it. So the current work visas are issued for 3 years, but from November 2023, they're going to be issuing accredited employer work visas for 5 years. So for anybody applying from November onwards would automatically get that 5-year visa. For those already in the country on the accredited employer work visas that are valid for up to 3 years at the moment, they will have the ability to apply for the remaining 2 years, providing their employment hasn't changed, are still in the same role with the same employer. They would not need a new job check to do that. They will be able just to apply for that top up, taking them to the maximum of 5 years. Now that is the maximum. They are not going to be extended beyond that, because you will need to either have a pathway to residence, either through the 6-point skilled migrant system or through the Greenlist or sector agreement. If you reach that 5-year period without a pathway to residence, you are going to have to leave New Zealand and remain offshore for 12 months on a stand-down period before you would be able to reapply and come back to New Zealand. So that's quite a significant shift, but good news for people already on their accredited employer work visas, knowing they can extend it up to that maximum of 5 years.
Awesome, thanks Julia. So we're now just going to talk around a couple of alternative pathways to residency. The skilled migrant category is obviously one of our main pathways, but we do also have a couple other options which may be which you may be eligible for. So we've got the Greenlist. The Greenlist has 2 tiers to it. So tier 1 enables you to be eligible to apply straight to residence. So it is what it sounds like. It is a fast-tracked residency visa, and it allows people to apply for residence outright, travel to New Zealand initially on a resident visa, and skip the work visa stage. Tier 1 includes some construction managers, healthcare workers, some ICT professionals, but there are certain criteria attached to each occupation. So you do have to meet the criteria of each occupation to be eligible. In some cases, it is an occupational registration. So the likes of healthcare workers, they have to have registration with their relevant board. If you're in the ICT space, you may have to meet a certain salary threshold to be able to apply. And then in some cases, you do also have certain qualifications you have to hold, and those qualifications either have to be automatically recognised or assessed by NZQA, like Fabien has already spoken about. Straight to residence at the moment takes roughly about 8 weeks. There are some exceptions to that. So you may consider applying for work visas first if you perhaps need to undertake English language tests and you can't get those done quickly, or if you're from a country that requires a national security check, because those can take up to 6 months to complete. So if you're from parts of Asia or Africa, that's just something that you may need to consider. The second tier of the Greenlist is for the work to residence. So that is a pathway that enables people to be able to apply for residence after having worked in New Zealand for 24 months. There's a range of occupations on that tier 2. We've got some heavy machine operators, we've got some tradesmen, and there's a whole range of occupations in there now, and they expanded it quite significantly in May. So there's that is definitely another option. You may find in some cases, for example, you may be able to claim points under the skilled migrant category for your occupational registration, and then apply after 2 years of working in New Zealand, which may be exactly the same as the Greenlist work to residency. So ultimately, it'd be a case of weighing up what is going to be the fastest pathway to residency for you, and which we can help you with, and then deciding, all right, this is what we're going to aim for. We have also got 2 areas of sector agreements. So I will quickly talk to the care workforce sector agreement. So a sector agreement is basically something that's been stood up by Immigration New Zealand to acknowledge that there are a couple of industries where there is a massive shortage of workers at the moment, where they do rely heavily on people coming in from overseas to fill those roles. So the care workforce is one of them, that covers basically a wide range of carers, whether you be working in a rest home or in the community as a carer. And once you've worked in New Zealand and you've been paid at level 4 of the pay equity scheme, which at the moment is $28.25, you can apply after working in New Zealand for 24 months. So it is almost like another Greenlist work to residency type situation, where you've got the requirement of having to be paid $28-25 per hour, or whatever the equivalent is at the time of application, plus having worked in New Zealand for 24 months. And I will let Julia talk to the transport sector, which is our other sector agreement with a residence pathway.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Charlotte. So yeah, for the transport sector, they've added a few of the occupations listed there. So we've got bus drivers, truck drivers, and ships masters. Now, each come with their own little requirements they have to meet. So for bus drivers, they would need a minimum pay rate of $28 an hour, which is below the median, but they still have a work to residence pathway open. For truck drivers, you would need to have a class 4 or 5 license, or the overseas equivalent, plus a pay rate of the median, which is $29.66 an hour or more. And the same for ships masters, they would need that median pay rate of $29.66 an hour or more. So those occupations would be able to apply for residency once they've been in employment for 24 months. So it's another good alternative for those particular occupations.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. And thanks, Fabien, as well, for all of your help on explaining all of those changes. Now, we do understand this is a massive change. It is the biggest change that we've seen in skilled migrant policy in probably about 15 years. So we understand it does create questions, and there will obviously be a lot of people who aren't sure about what their pathway to residency looks like now. So if you are already a client of New Zealand Shores, I would recommend reaching out to your dedicated licensed advisor, and we will be able to talk you through what that pathway looks like for you. We will be able to map out whether you have one option or two or three to be able to apply for residence. If you aren't yet a client of New Zealand Shores, we recommend you reach out info@newzealandshores.com. We would basically require your date of birth and a copy of your CV, and we will then be able to undertake an eligibility assessment for you. You can also complete the eligibility assessment on our website, which is www.newzealandshores.com. So feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We look forward to giving you your pathway to residency under the new policy.